The week in Raiders sports was highlighted by girls basketball team's dominant performance against Arlington Catholic, a game in which they did not allow a single point in the first quarter. Filling in for our Dean of Sports this week, are you sitting down? Are you ready? It's Joe Thompson who has the latest news and highlights from the winter sports season.
Hey, hope you're having a great week so far. If you're a regular viewer of this program, you would normally expect to see the Dean of Sports, Mr. Dan Hogan, bringing you the highlights from the Watertown Raiders throughout the week. But as you saw earlier in the broadcast, Dan was busy covering other events that were happening around the city this week. So I was asked to fill in for him as he recovers from carrying the show on his back. So without much further ado, here's what's been happening with the Watertown Raiders this past week, starting with the boys and girls basketball teams. The Watertown girls team struggled massively out of the gate after winning their first game of the season, dropping 5 straight losses while struggling to put points on the board, after picking up their second win of the season on Friday the 13th, no less, against Wilmington. The Raiders had a chance to make it 2 in a row this past Sunday against Arlington Catholic. Started things off at a 14-point lead for the Raiders in the second quarter, to then make it a 17-point lead as Lily Lambeau knocks down the corner 3 to make it 18-1. Later on in that same quarter, Caroline Andre gets the block on an Arlington Catholic layup, and that leads to a fast break where senior captain Maeve Lawn is waiting down low to finish the layup to make it 20-4. Moving on to the early third quarter, Maeve Lawn gets the pass from Adriana Williams to set up the easy mid-range jump shot. Raiders up 22-4. Now at the end of the third, Victoria Dicker gets around the defender and gets the shot to fall to make it 29-8. Then we move on to the fourth quarter, where Lily Lambeau finds Adriana Williams, who weaves her way into the paint and gets a floater to fall to make it 33-14. Watertown gets the easy win in this one, final score of 38-18 for their second straight win. The Raiders made it to 3 in a row this past Tuesday with a win over Reading Memorial, eking out a 41-36 victory over the Rockets. Speaking of Reading Memorial and Tuesdays, the Watertown boys basketball team played host to the Rockets boys basketball team, a game in which I had the pleasure of doing play-by-play for. It was a slow start for both teams in the early goings of the first quarter, with only 8 combined points. That was until Johnny Kakachi gets the pass from Robbie Iannetta to knock down the corner 3 to give the Raiders up to 5 points, and to cut the lead to 1. Captain Riley Donlin got into some foul trouble early though, seen here as Reading center James Murphy gets the and-1 layup to fall. Watertown woke up in the second quarter though, as Jeffrey Urban gets separation from his defender to knock down the step-back 3 to give the Raiders the lead. Urban wasn't done yet, however, as he drives into the lane to get the and-1 to fall. Raiders lead 26-20 at halftime. The Rockets retake the lead in the third, but here's Ben Coleman doing what he does best, hitting long-range 3s to cut into the lead. Fourth quarter now, and it's Ben Coleman again from deep, getting the bank shot to drop and keeping the Raiders' hopes alive. Unfortunately, the Rockets took advantage of Riley Donlin's foul trouble and take the win over the Raiders, 50-42. Finally tonight, Watertown boys hockey had only their 5th home game this past weekend, taking on Wilmington over at John Ryan Arena. Starting things off ironically at the end of the first period as Wilmington gets on the board first with a close-range shot that beats Watertown goalie and assistant captain Caleb Williams. Wildcats up 1-0. No goals would be scored in the second period. Then in the third, Watertown keeps the puck in the zone, and senior captain Ryan Desmond slots it past the goalie to knot things up 1-1 with 12:49 left in the third period. Wilmington answered right back, however. Less than a minute after the Raiders tied up, the Wildcats retake the lead with 11:56 to go. Caleb Williams getting beat to his left side once again. Wilmington up 2-1. The Raiders would not go down without a fight, however, against the Division II team, as a blast from Caden Salzman from the blue line ties the game once again at 2-2, and the two teams would take it to overtime in this one. Watertown would get shots on net early and often in the overtime period, but a turnover at center ice would prove to be costly, as Wilmington gets a 2-on-1 and beats senior Caleb Williams in the 5-hole to give the Wildcats a 3-2 overtime victory against the Raiders. Watertown would then travel to Wilmington in their game this past Wednesday, in which they were routed by the Wildcats 6-2. Following those tough back-to-back losses, the boys hockey team will travel to Stoneham to take on the Trojans on Saturday at 6 p.m. As part of a Stoneham weekend tripleheader, the Raiders boys and girls basketball teams will be partaking in a doubleheader on Friday against the Trojans. The boys game will start at 5:30 p.m., followed by the girls game at 7 p.m. That's going to do it for this edition of the Raiders Report. I'm Joe Thompson. Dan will be back next week fully recharged and ready to go. Let's send it back to Jim and Maya in the studio. Take it away, guys.
Dan who?
Yeah, Dan who?
What?
We have our professor of sports
Well,
now. We don't need no Dan.
Dan, there is an opening for weather. In case you,